Hello, for this lesson we are talking about one of my favorite topics, and that is probability. Now the reason this is one of my favorite topics is because probability takes a big part in many different games. So if we're talking about something like Monopoly, or if you play more strategy games, or any games, right, you're usually dealing with some sort of probability, and I really like games. So that's why I love this topic. It's been one of my favorites since I was a little kid when I was learning how to play games like Settlers of Catan. But enough nerding out. So here we go. Probability. Okay, we're talking about probability, and we're also going to talk about odds. All right, and how they're slightly different. Okay, these are the rules you need to know for this topic. The first problem, okay, or the first rule is that the probability will equal the number of favorable outcomes over the number of possible outcomes. Okay, notice in the denominator, it includes all possible outcomes. That includes favorable and unfavorable. Okay, so whatever that situation is, any possible outcome, that needs to be included in the denominator. An error people makes is that they put in the numerator the number of favorable, and in the denominator, the ones that aren't that favorable option. Okay? But that's not probability, and that's going to take us to where we're talking about odds. Okay? So odds are slightly different from probability. So you have two different types of odds. Odds in favor and odds against. Okay? So for odds in favor of an event, okay, it's going to be the number of favorable outcomes, just like in probability, but in the denominator, this time, instead of all possible outcomes, it's just the number of unfavorable outcomes. So it's the favorable compared to the unfavorable. Okay? And then odds against, it's similar to odds in favor, but it's flipped. So in the numerator, it's going to be the number of unfavorable outcomes over the number of favorable outcomes. Okay? So you need to know those differences. If you remember them, right, or you use your book, you have your notes alongside you, and you remember those, it's going to be pretty easy. But if you forget and you accidentally do odds when you're doing probability, that's going to be problematic. Okay? So let's look at some example problems. Okay, so here we go. Probability. It says find each probability for one roll of a number cube. Okay? So they use the term number cube because they have to specify what shape it is. A cube, right, has 6 sides. There are lots of different types of dice. So they're always very specific when they're saying what they're rolling. Okay, it's a number cube. It's a normal die. It has the numbers 1 through 6. Okay? So here we go. This says, for number 1, P in parentheses 6. Okay, what that means is the probability of the number 6 being rolled. All right? Well, remember, probability, our formula for that, okay, it's the number of favorable. Okay, well, how many chances would you have to roll a 6? That would be 1. And then it's over the number of possible outcomes. There are 6 possible outcomes, okay, right? Because you could roll a 1, a 2, a 3, a 4, a 5, or a 6. Remember, 6, even though it's the favorable outcome, it's still included because for probability, it is the number of favorable over the total number of possibilities. Okay? For number 2, what's the probability of rolling an even number? Well, if we think about a die, right, a number cube, it has 6 numbers, and 3 of them are even. That means that we have 3 favorable outcomes, and there are still 6 possible outcomes when you roll a die. Okay? When you're rolling a number cube, 6 is always going to be the denominator, until, 3 over 6 simplifies to 1 over 2, okay? So our first number should usually have a 6 if we're talking about a number cube because it's going to be, there's 6 possible outcomes always. Over here, so 3 is the probability of the number 7 being rolled. Well, we know that there's 6 possible outcomes. That's, like I said, going to be consistent. But guess what? Number cubes don't include the number 7. Okay, so we would actually have 0 possible outcomes, okay, or favorable outcomes, I apologize. There are 6 possible outcomes, and none of them are the number 7, okay? In this next section, we're going to talk about odds in favor and odds against, okay? So it says find the odds for and against, the odds for and odds against, selecting a letter at random from the name Zerubbabel. Zerubbabel is one of my favorite names because it's awesome. Okay, it's from the Bible and it's pretty cool beans. But number 4, it says, all right, what is, we're looking for the odds for and the odds against for the letter B. Well, remember, odds for. Okay, odds for. That's the first thing it asked me, so I'm going to take care of the first thing it asked for first. Odds for. That's the favorable outcomes, and it's over the unfavorable outcomes. Well, I have 1, 2, 3 B's in the name Zerubbabel. So my favorable outcomes, that's 3. All right, and now again, remember odds. Odds we're talking about favorable versus unfavorable, not total. So this time I'm going to ignore the B's when I'm counting for this one. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It's going to be 3 over 7. 3 over 7 doesn't simplify. So my odds for is 3 for 7. And my odds against, well, guess what that's going to be? Remember, odds against, it's unfavorable over favorable. Well, we already found those two values. So the odds for are always just the odds, the odds against are always the opposite of the odds for. Okay, so it's just flipping those values because now this is 3, that's the favorable, over 7, the unfavorable. That's odds for. Over here I have 7, that's unfavorable, over 3, the favorable, so that's odds against. Okay? And I can label those if you want to make sure you've got that noted. Against. Okay? Or if you're skipping through this lesson and you don't know what I just said because you just skipped to this point. Okay? Odds for, it's 3 over 7. Odds against, it's 7 over 3. Okay, let's talk about a vowel. Okay, well, let's go through. First, I'm going to take care of odds for. 1, 2, 3, 4. I've got 4 vowels. Okay? And then over here I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So, my odds for are 4 to 6 or 2 over 3. Okay? Remember, odds against are simply going to be the inverse of it, right? So it's going to be 3 over 2, or if we had written it out before, it would have been 6 over 4 to start with, okay? Now this time, this one says we need the odds for a consonant being selected, and the odds against. So let's take care of 4. Okay, so 4. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And I hope some of you have noticed something. Hopefully you noticed that this is really just the opposite of what we just did. Okay? Because remember, really what this was 4 is the number of vowels, 6 is the number of consonants. We just flipped to what we were looking at. Okay? So, moral of the story here. Okay, and then we flip the inverse. It's going to be 4 over 6. Okay, equals 2 over 3. Okay. Moral of the story is you simply need to understand what are they asking for, right? What are they selecting? So sometimes they might give you the example of a name, right? They might give you the example where there's marbles in a bag. There's lots of different forms that this can take. You need to understand what form are they taking and what are they asking for. Are they asking for probability? Remember the rule for probability. Are they asking for odds for? Are they asking for odds against? Remember the rules for them. Good luck on your lesson.